You're listening to the Becoming a Star podcast, where we interview athletes, coaches, GMs, and others in the sports industry about their career and what it takes to make it to the highest levels.
And shot, score! He scored! 2.1 remaining. Can you believe it?
We're very excited to have our next guest. She grew up in Arizona, where the Coyotes were just becoming established and hockey wasn't a huge deal. She went on to play 4 years at Harvard, captained her senior year, 12th all-time point leader in school history, won gold medals representing Team USA at the World and World Junior Championships, and capped off an incredible career with the silver medal in the 2014 Winter Olympics. We're very excited to have on Lyndsey Fry today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Yes, thank you so much for coming on. I guess first things first, with the crazy world we live in, what have you been up to the last 2 months? What's life kind of been like?
Yeah, man, I've been busy. It's been good though. Everything I think gets so crazy, especially when you're working for an NHL team, and when you're working in the youth hockey space, because you're going 100 miles an hour during hockey season,
Right.
and then you're going 100 miles an hour doing youth programming all summer long. So I've actually really been enjoying the break. It's been a nice opportunity for me to just breathe for a second. I'm very entrepreneurial by nature,
Yeah.
so it's given me some time to think through some different projects, try some different things. My weakest aspect of like all of my business stuff that I do has been my social media game. So I'm really trying to work on that. But yeah, it's been a ton of fun. I've been working on doing more like mental performance coaching, which you can do over Zoom, which is great. We've been trying to figure out some creative ways for the Youth Hockey Association that I'm the president of. We've been trying to get creative with how to engage the kids online, as I'm sure a lot of people have. So we've been doing some online workouts, some different webinars. For our coaches, we've actually been bringing in some awesome coaches to kind of give just their perspective to some of our developing coaches, which has been awesome. I've been writing some like hockey children's stories, which has been fun. So I've been kind of all over, but I've been enjoying it a lot. It's been nice to hang out with my fiance and just relax a bit.
Yeah, I'm right there with you, especially on the up in the social media game. Not something I've usually done much of before, so it's been interesting.
For
So
sure.
you grew up in Arizona, which wasn't really a hockey hotbed when you were kind of coming up the youth ranks. Where did your love for hockey come from? And, you didn't have the resources that they have now. So what was it like growing up in Arizona and playing a sport that wasn't exactly super popular?
Yeah, so it's interesting. I mean, I kind of had like two things working against me. One, it was Arizona. So being a desert state, we had to kind of fight that stigma of it being a hockey community. And then two, I was a girl. So yeah, at the time I was born, there were like less than 20 girls in the entire state of Arizona, and it's a big state.
It's crazy.
There were less than 20 girls playing. So it was very new for the state to have girls playing hockey, and so I played with all boys. But the way that I got into it is because I fell in love with the Mighty Ducks movies. I was a big Disney lover as a little kid, and
Yeah.
D2 was always my favorite. I loved D2. And yeah, it was great too, because at that time I was probably 4, 5, and my dad was actually commuting for work to Southern California. So I actually got to go to some real Ducks games when I was a kid in person. And I don't know, I got the little plastic skates that would strap onto your shoes, and I was hooked. So I actually started as a roller player when I was 5, and then transitioned to ice when I was 6.
Okay. I think it's a pretty popular trend for a lot right now. And I think right now we'll see even more, honestly. A lot of kids are strapping on the roller skates and getting outside, and hopefully that brings them into roller hockey and eventually either playing roller hockey or eventually ice like you did. So I looked at your page, and I think you just mentioned it, that you played Tier 1 in Colorado before going to Harvard. Did you have any other schools in mind too? Why did you choose to go to Harvard?
Yeah, so I think I knew pretty early that I wanted to go Ivy League. I was, I wasn't the kid that took, 10 AP classes at a time. I always was in, honors classes throughout high school and did pretty well, but I wouldn't, I don't really think that I would have gotten into Harvard on grades alone, or on an Ivy League to an Ivy League school on grades alone. So I kind of looked at it though as like, if I were to have spent all that time, all those years growing up that I put into hockey, if I had spent that time on studying and school and prepping for the SATs and the ACTs, like I kind of believed, if I'd spent all that time focusing on academics, I would have gotten into an Ivy League school on
Right.
academics alone. So I kind of saw being able to go play at an Ivy League school as like the ultimate reward for all the hard work I had put into hockey. And don't get me wrong, like I worked hard in school, but it just wasn't the same as like when you think of somebody who like purely gets into an Ivy League on their own,
Right.
or on academics alone.
Right. You probably
So
had a lot going on
right.
with your hockey career at the same time.
Right. So for me, we definitely had to do well, but so for me, I was pretty set on Ivies. And I think for me too, like you have to keep in mind back then, it wasn't that long ago, but back then, I mean, we didn't have any professional women's hockey, and obviously, professional women's hockey is a little fragmented now, but I knew I wasn't going to be playing for money long term, and that's still kind of the way it is today. And so for me, I wanted to make sure I had that educational piece that would kind of help accelerate me in whichever professional avenue I decided to go down. And fortunately, I ended up looking very closely at Cornell and Harvard. That's what I ended up choosing between. And to be completely honest, I was initially really set on Cornell, and my parents were the ones who, at the time, I just like was being, I don't know, I was trying to be a rebel and go against everything they said. But I'm thankful I listened to them, because they were like, you're choosing between Ithaca, New York, where it's like cold and rainy and not a lot to do, and like Cambridge and Boston. And so I think they knew me better than I knew myself as far as like what I would need in a college experience. And I've never regretted it for a second. I had a phenomenal experience at Harvard. It kicked my butt at first, but it was overall, it shaped me as a person.
Right. And for those who don't know Harvard women's hockey, I was looking at the records over time. It has become a very good program. I think right along the time you came into the program, maybe a little bit before. I think they've had the same coach for a really long time. I think there was a year or two where she left and then came back, but an extraordinary program. So did that kind of help you develop as both a player and a person?
Oh, 100%. I honestly believe that if I didn't go and play for Harvard, I wouldn't have made the Olympic team. And those who know, I mean, my Olympic coach or my Harvard coach ended up being my Olympic coach. So, there's always going to be those people who are like, oh, well, yeah, of course you made the Olympic team. Like, it was your Harvard coach. You were one of the Harvard kids. And what people don't realize is, yeah, she sees me more often, but she sees the bad with the good, right? So if I didn't come to Harvard practice ready to go, like that was a mark against me for the Olympic team. But I think what Coach Stone did, and what's so like fundamental to her coaching style, she doesn't care if you're a first line superstar or a fourth line grinder, or if you're sitting in the stands. Like, she's going to treat everyone equally. She's going to hold everybody to the same high expectation. And when you get on the ice for a practice or a game, like, you put your hard hat on and you go to work. So there was none of this like, okay, well, like our talented kids can get away with whatever and everybody else has to work hard. And that's kind of like, I don't want to say that's what I had going through high school, but high school was different because there was a big drop off from, our top 5 players to the rest of the team. And so it was hard for our coach, like if I wasn't working hard, or if some of our other top players weren't working hard in high school, we still got to play. So I definitely came into college a little cocky. I was a big fish in a small pond out west, and really did not know what I was getting into playing New England women's
Right.
hockey. So it was a really humbling experience, and she definitely kind of gave me that grit, showed me that you don't just get handed things based on talent, you have to work for them. And I think I worked my butt off for her, and ultimately it paid off.
Definitely. And I didn't know that your coach at Harvard was also the coach in the Olympics. So that's pretty cool that you guys already, I mean, like you said, you might have some skeptics, but it also is cool that you already had that, relationship with her and that sort of thing too. I think that probably made it
Yeah.
a bit less nerve wracking, because I can imagine going to the Olympics is a
Yeah,
bit nerve
it's
wracking.
interesting. It is, well, yeah, for sure. But what's interesting is, I had a really tight relationship with coach personally. My best friend passed away 2 days before Christmas, my freshman year, and I was just like an absolute wreck. My parents are back in Arizona. So as far as like adults in my life, like she was my go-to person. So we got pretty close through that experience. And I had some other struggles that I was dealing with freshman and sophomore year. And so I went from being able to go into her office and like cry if I needed to, or just talk if I needed to, whatever it was, like anything I needed, we had that relationship. And she was very open door policy with all of her Harvard players.
Mhm.
When we got to the Olympics, it became, not even when we started training for the Olympics, so like 6 months before, it became really clear that that wasn't what our Olympic relationship was going to get to be.
Right.
And I think a lot of that had to do with, one, I mean, she wanted to make sure that she wasn't showing any sort of favoritism to her Harvard players. And it's just, I mean, it's a lot more cutthroat environment. Like, we all started practicing together in August of 2013, and we had to get cut down by 4 players. So it was a really stressful experience, and it was great, and I wouldn't trade it for anything. But as far as like having that relationship, I personally think she was a lot harder on the Harvard kids during practice. She expected that much more of us because she knew us and she knew what she expected of us. And
Right.
so yeah, it was good, but it was very different during the Olympic year with her.
So what was it like? I guess you did this 3 different times with the World Juniors, World Championship, and the Olympics, but what's it like getting the call or meeting or whatever to know you made the team? I mean, what's that reaction, and what does it feel like to know you're playing in the Olympics?
Yeah, I mean, I'll kind of go through each one because they all were really different. When I made my first U18 team, I was 16 years old. I was really young. And so back then, I mean, like, I was obviously excited. I was very proud to be able to go and wear the Team USA jersey. But it was like, again, I was a little cocky back then. So at that point, it was sort of like, yeah, I am one of the best players in the world. Like, I expect this. So that was kind of my reaction for that one. A year later, I played on the U18 team again when I was 17. And what's interesting is, leading up to World Championships for under 18s, you get invited to an August training camp, and then you get invited to the World's training camp in December. So I didn't get invited to August camp that year. So what was interesting is, like, I wasn't expecting to make the team when I was 17 because I didn't get invited to August camp. So I
Right.
had honestly kind of been like, all right, well, forget these guys. Like, I was just like mad and frustrated. And then out of the blue, I get a call saying, hey, we want to invite you to camp and you're going to be on the team. So like, I had to go from being like all mad at Team USA to then being like, oh yeah, like super pumped to be back with everyone. So that one was kind of interesting. The World Championship one was really powerful because what the way that it works is you don't just like get onto the national team and stay on. We have camps 2 or 3 times a year. There's the Four Nations tournament and the World Championship tournament on all the non-Olympic years. So you really only have like 3 to 5 times to actually get invited to come play. And you can literally play in April on a World Championship team and not get invited to camp in August. So after my U18s, I went to one camp. It was 2 days after my friend had passed away. So I was like not present at all. And then I didn't get invited to a senior national team camp for like a year and a half after that. So for me, I had to work extremely hard to make it onto that world championship roster. And that was Worlds of 2013. It was the last major tournament before the Olympics. And so that one was extremely special for me because it was like this year and a half of extremely hard work and dedication and focus like I had never had before. It was kind of like a affirmation that it was all worth it, and like I was one step closer. So that one was really meaningful for me. What was interesting about, so we had Olympic tryouts in June of 2013, and that one was, I think, the worst one, because all they did was announce the like centralization roster, which basically meant the 25 of us who were moving on. But we were in a room of 40 people, and you have to keep in mind, like, a lot of those women were teammates of mine at Harvard, teammates who I had played with on Team USA before, like these people that you develop these relationships with, and they read the names alphabetical order. And so it's just like one of your friends doesn't get their name announced, and it's just like a jab to your heart. But then your name gets announced, and it's like the best thing ever. So like that one was really, really tough. And then when we actually found out that we had made the final roster, it was right before we went home for like 4 or 5 days for Christmas. We had just finished up a game against against Canada in North Dakota, and we all were in like our hotel after, and coaches called a meeting, and we're all kind of looking around, and like coaches aren't there yet, and we see like 2 of our teammates aren't there, and we're like, oh, okay, like this is it. We're about to find out, because we still had 2 more cuts to go. And they came in and they read off the official roster, and I like have chills thinking about it. And that was like indescribable. But the cooler part for me, and I know this is probably a longer answer than you wanted, but the cooler part for me was I immediately called my brother and I was like, hey, I made the team, don't tell mom and dad. And he's like, what? And so in my family, we have to like perform at Christmas Eve in front of everybody in the family. You can do a skit, you can do a dance, song, whatever you want. And I was like, let's tell them in a skit. And I was able to sell it because we still had one more game after Christmas before New Year's, and New Year's is when we were going to get announced to the whole world. So I just like lied like crazy to my parents, told them, you know, oh, they haven't made a decision, they haven't whatever. And Christmas Eve, my brother and I come out, and I end up like turning this poster around that says "We did it" with the Olympic rings on it. And like everybody's screaming, everybody's crying. And for me, that was the coolest thing, because like people ask me, how did you make it as this little girl from Chandler, Arizona? And I'm like, because I had awesome parents. I had parents who were willing to support me. They sacrificed a lot. They flew me back and forth to Colorado so I could play all through high school. They helped me pay for my college. Like, if I didn't have that kind of support, we wouldn't be here talking. So for me to be able to give that moment to my family as like, I didn't do it, we did it, was hands down the coolest part of, I would argue, like the entire Olympic experience.
Yeah, that sounds incredible. I don't have anything like that in my family. Kind of luckily, I'm not very good at acting. I probably wouldn't be able to pull that off too well. But yeah, that sounds incredible. Like you said, you have three very different stories along your path. So that's exciting. Obviously, everyone dreams of playing in the Olympics. I think looking back for me, it was like, I feel like I watched the Olympics and wanted to wear and represent Team USA before I wanted to represent like my major league team. You know, I think you just like that aspect of representing your country. So what was it like to suit up in the red, white, and blue and have really, you know, you could look at it as having 300 million fans behind you?
Yeah, it's really hard to describe, and I think it's a little different for everyone because you're not just thinking about representing your country. You're also thinking about representing your state and your community that you came from and all the people who had helped you get to that moment. So I think for me, like I was very aware of the fact that I was the first hockey player from Arizona, male or female, to be playing at the Olympics. So I knew how impactful it was that I was just there, and how much more so it would be for Arizona and for Arizona hockey, especially Arizona girls hockey, if we were able to come home with a medal. So for me, you know, that's really what I thought about. It's really interesting, and you go back to like the TJ Oshie interview moment when, you know, they're calling him a hero and he's like, the guys in camo are the heroes. It is this weird thing when, you know, you think about like, man, like I'm out here representing your country. At least for me, I don't know, it's really bizarre because it's hard to wrap your head around that and not think about like, you know, the people who are actually out there defending our country. And you're kind of like, I just love playing hockey, and like I'm
Right.
just so thankful to be here. But it's really powerful, and you do every single time you're wearing the jersey and you hear the anthem and you see the fans in the crowd wearing your stuff. It's a really powerful feeling, and hard to put words to.
Yeah, I think, you know, you mentioned pressure a little bit. So we actually had someone on Facebook asked what the, I'm guessing it's probably the Olympics just because you are on such a big stage representing such a big deal. But the question was, what was the biggest pressure you've ever faced in the sport, and how did you prepare to face it?
Um, that's a really good question. I mean, I would say like probably leading up to the Olympics was the most pressure I ever felt. I probably put too much pressure on myself because at that point, you know, it was like it was still unclear if we were on the final roster, but our parents were booking rooms and buying flights and investing all this money and going over there. So I definitely put pressure on myself in that regard. I also put a lot of pressure on myself because it was like I've worked so hard to get to this point. Like I just was like beside myself thinking about the possibility that I may not, like I'll come up just short. So
Right.
I think that's when I put the most like personal pressure on myself. But what's interesting about the Olympics, eh, as far as like actual games, I wouldn't say the Olympics for me personally was the most pressure. And that was just because my role on the Olympic team was very different than my role at Harvard. I was like fourth line grinder, muck and go. Like that was my role on the Olympic team. And I was good at it. Like I'm a big girl. I could protect the puck in the corner. I could do whatever my coaches asked me to do. So, you know, I didn't get, you know, a ton of playing time in the final game. So for me, I viewed my role as like I need to just keep like cheering my teammates up, make sure they're feeling loose, make sure like they're feeling locked in, and kind of help take some of that pressure off of them. That's kind of how I viewed my role.
Right.
But when I came back as a senior at Harvard, you know, we had a lot of big moments that year. We went to the Bean Pot final and won. We went to the ECAC final and won. We went to the Frozen Four, made it to the final game. So I would say, as far as individual games are concerned, being a senior, coming off of an Olympic year, being a leader, being, you know, a first line player, I put a lot more pressure on myself as a player my senior year at Harvard than I
Is
did
that
at the Olympics.
is that your favorite? What's your favorite memory of all your hockey memories?
Oh man, it's so hard, right? I think if we had won gold at the Olympics, that probably would have been it for sure for me. But I think as far as like my favorite memories, many of them came from my senior year. When I started as a freshman at Harvard, we were average at best. I mean, we barely made it into our league playoffs. We lost in the first round. There was a lot of cultural issues on the team. And by my senior year, it was interesting because like on paper, we were one of the best teams in the country. Like a couple of people had taken a year off for injury. They came back. Coach, myself, two other players from the Olympic team were coming back. It was just like this perfect storm. Like you rarely get a class of seniors where every single person is like an impact player, and that's what we had. And so on paper, we were this phenomenal team. One of our earliest games, we were playing against BC, which was one of our rivals, and they just crushed us. It was like 9-2. And we're like, oh my gosh, like what are we going to do? And our senior class had to really rally together and just, we had to recognize that it was our responsibility to lead by example. And we somehow managed to turn that team around collectively as a group and collectively as a team. And then we're able to have all the success that we had. So when I think about my favorite memories, as far as hockey specific memories, they're definitely winning the Bean Pot because we beat BC, which was awesome. Winning the ECAC final because we beat Cornell, who was also one of our rivals and we hated. And then we beat BC again at the Frozen Four to get into the final game against Minnesota. So those are my favorite hockey memories. But as far as my favorite memory at the Olympics, I would definitely say it was the first time I went out for practice on that ice, for two reasons. One, my family was there, and I remember like getting ready to like go out the tunnel for practice. And my brother, who was like 19 at the time, 18, he wasn't like a young kid. You would have thought he was like a 5-year-old. He was so excited. He's like leaning over the tunnel. I hadn't seen him yet at all in Sochi. He's like leaning over the tunnel, waving, and you could tell he was like kind of crying. And it was just, that was like super special. And then seeing the Olympic rings on the boards for the first time at that practice was like, oh, okay, we're here. It's real.
Right. Right. I can only imagine. Was your family there like the whole time or just for the start or?
No, they were there start to finish. And what's really interesting is like people should really be interviewing them because like their story is so much more interesting in Sochi. They stayed on a cruise ship that had come in from Spain, I believe, that was docked. So they stayed on a cruise ship for 30 days.
Really?
And the reason they did that is because like Sochi was kind of notorious for being like very much pulled together at the last minute. Everything was really nice and like our stuff was nice, but like hotels weren't, it was like unclear if hotels were going to be built. So they stayed there for that whole amount of time. But what was really cool for them is they, because like the political climate around Russia at the time, a lot of people didn't go. So like they were giving out free tickets to events left and right. So like things that in Vancouver would have cost them, literally thousands of dollars, they got to go to for free just to like make the buildings look cool. So they had a really awesome experience. My brother, my parents, my grandparents, my parents' best friend, my best friend, like it was a whole crew, and it was awesome to have them there.
It's pretty sweet. I did not know any of that, so that's pretty cool. What do you have like any interaction with some of the other athletes from other sports or other countries going on? I mean, what's the interaction like among Olympians?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I didn't really know what to expect when we got there. Really, the only rule we had as a team was that we weren't going to like ooh and ah over NHL players. And that was really like intentional because our mindset was, while we're at the Olympics, like we are 100% equal. And so we didn't like, there were a lot of athletes from other countries going up to like Chara and like just obviously all the big players and asking for autographs and pictures. And we were like, no go with any of those athletes. It was funny. Kids think this is like the coolest thing ever. But I remember I was like reaching at the salad bar. The dining hall is where you had the most interaction with people. But I was reaching for something at the salad bar and I like bump hands with somebody. And I was like, oh, sorry. And I look up and it's Ovechkin. So it's just like cool things like that. I think the coolest part though, like we didn't really interact too much with other countries because you are there to compete. But it is cool to see like other countries' cultural, whatever it is. But what was cool for us is like we were a team sport. So when we sat in the dining hall together, like we sit with our teammates. What I didn't realize is that for a lot of the other sports, figure skating, curling, like they're not massive team sports. So for them, when they see a Team USA jacket, like that's their team. So like Charlie White and Meryl, who were the ice dancing like superstars of the time, they would just come and like sit with us and chat because like we're all Team USA, Gracie Gold, like, so that I think was one of the coolest things for me that I wasn't expecting is like, we really got to like know those guys. And that was super cool because like to us, I mean, those are like those are the people we see on TV. And
Right.
so that was a lot of fun.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty cool to be the superstars that you don't really even realize it.
Hmm. And I think the other thing too is just like, there's definitely athlete interaction, but at the end of the day, like it's apparent like everybody's there to compete. And
Right.
so and what was really interesting that people don't realize is like when you're overseas, like we would be having dinner after our game, and the figure skaters, it would be like 8 o'clock at night, and the figure skaters are having their like pre-event meal because their events sometimes weren't until 11 p.m. So it
Right.
was just like interesting to interact with athletes and like see what their schedules had to be to align with American TV.
Right. Would you say, obviously the Olympics are competitive, but what is more competitive, a bean pop final or a game in the Olympics for you?
It depends which game. I would say US Canada, like those are always gonna be the biggest games on women's hockey. So those ones you can't really compare to, but I would say a Harvard versus BC or a Harvard versus Cornell game when I was playing was a lot more intense than Team USA versus Japan, for example. So
Right.
it just, you want to mentally prepare the same way for every single game. But when it comes to like somebody hacking you in the back of the legs and you pushing back on someone, like that's Canada, US.
Right. Right. So I wanted to transition after your Olympic and college career because obviously you went to Harvard. They don't let anyone into Harvard. I know you said you didn't get there in grades alone, but I'm guessing that had a lot to do with it. So you're obviously a pretty smart person. You chose not to go into a high paying corporate career. Instead, you chose to come back home and help grow girls and youth hockey in Arizona. Why was that so important to you? And can you talk about some of the things that you have done or are doing right now?
Yeah. So it's funny. I mean, when I started college, all I wanted to do was be a mechanical engineer so that I could build rides for Disneyland. Like that was my like ambition when I started, and then I was awful at physics. So that dream died pretty quickly.
Me too. Me too.
um yeah, so I switched over to history of science. So by the time I graduated, I like had no idea what I wanted to do. But what's super interesting is when I was first like getting ready to come home, I actually wanted nothing to do with hockey. It was sort of like, okay, I'll give back here and there. I'll go, help out at community events. But as far as a true career path, I felt like that was a cop out. And so when I got back home, I didn't really know exactly what I wanted to do. I had already had a relationship with the Coyotes, and so I was happy to like run some programming for them, but I never really envisioned getting as involved as I am today. But I got home, started doing some stuff locally with the Coyotes, but then my parents helped me set up what I needed to get set up to run some camps. And I said, okay, I'll run a camp in Chandler, where I grew up. I'll run a camp in Colorado, maybe do it for 2 years and call it good and like give back to my communities that way while I figure out what I'm actually going to do for a career.
Right.
And what was really interesting when I started up Lyndsey Fry Hockey, which was supposed to just be those two camps, I started like realizing, there have to be other places like Arizona where there are girls playing, but nobody with an Olympic medal is going and giving them the time of day. So I literally just started Googling like all the random states I could think of. I started looking at like Alabama girls hockey, Georgia girls hockey, New Mexico girls hockey. And I had this list of contacts, started reaching out, ran like 10 camps my first year and realized, wait a second, I can actually combine my love of hockey and now this like totally unexpected love of marketing and business and kind of create a career path. And so that's when I sort of broke through that mental barrier when I saw some success with Lyndsey Fry Hockey. I broke through that barrier of I can't have both, or I have to go get some high paying corporate job, like you said.
Right.
So that was kind of the first piece of it. Then I got more and more involved in what we were doing with the Coyotes. And the guy who I work still to this day, 6 years later, very, very closely with, Matt Schott, he runs all the youth hockey programming through the Coyotes. And he and I started kind of dreaming up this idea of like, what could we really do to accelerate girls hockey here? The first idea we had was, well, we need some sort of feeder program, because historically here in Arizona, like all the girls programs we had were just, call them catch programs. Like, oh, well, we hope girls will start playing hockey and they'll play with the boys, and when they're 14, we'll have a team for them. So there really were only like 2 or 3 teams at a time for girls. So we're like, okay, well, how do we really ensure that girls are starting to play hockey? And that's when we started up Small Fries, which is an Arizona Coyotes program.
I
It's
love the
all
name, by the
girls.
way.
Thank you. That was Matt. But it's all girls, all women. We have no male coaches on the ice. And we've seen retention rates in girls just like completely change and climb, and it's been awesome. So then it was like, okay, well, now we've got this feeder. How do we create like a top to bottom infrastructure for girls so it's not just 2 or 3 older girls teams in the state? How do we make it so that a girl can start at Small Fries and play girls hockey all the way until she's 19 if she wants to? It took us 5 years to build it, but we eventually built an all-girls hockey association, and we're going into our 2nd year this year, called the Arizona Kachinas. So I'm the president of that program. We had 9 teams last year in our first year, which was up from like 3 girls teams that the state had the year before. And then we're hoping to have 12 this upcoming year. So that's kind of been my like professional path. And I've been working full time with the Coyotes to run these programs and do some marketing stuff for the last 2 years. But I think, this whole quarantine situation, like I said, I'm very entrepreneurial. So it's given me some time to explore some different ideas. And one of them that I've had recently that I think has the most traction is actually an online adult hockey program for adults who maybe don't have the confidence to just go to the rink and risk falling in front of other people, adults who want to have flexibility and, practice when they want to. So that I've got like 70 people interested in that program. So hopefully I can get that up and running, and we'll see.
That's interesting. You'll definitely have to share with our folks here in Omaha, because the interesting about Omaha is we have a college and a USHL program here, and have for, the college has been around over 20 years. USHL team's been here 30 years. But really over the past 5 to 10, it is just, hockey has exploded here, especially at the adult level. Like it's crazy how many adults are wanting to try hockey in Omaha. It's pretty insane. And I think that's probably the number one fear is obviously you don't want to go out there and fall in front of everyone. So I really like that idea. You'll have to share it for sure, because I think I would have a bunch of people that would be interested in it.
That'd be awesome. Yeah. And simple stuff too. Like, gosh, you get some of these adults that go out for like adult learn to play, and they haven't done a squat in like 20 years. So it's like there's so much that we can do off the ice before they even get on the ice. And like really, when they get on the ice, they're just learning how to skate. So like, let's teach them how to stick handle off the ice. But anyway, I'll definitely let you know how that goes.
Yeah. So you kind of mentioned this, but I was hoping you could elaborate on it a little bit, because it was another question we had from a Facebook parent here in Omaha. We have a semi-girls program. It's not its own program, but there's girls teams at the 10s, 12s, 14s, 16s, and 19s level. And pretty much they have to travel to Minnesota to play every single weekend. There's nothing. So everyone in the Midwest is in the same boat. Like there's just not enough in the Midwest to be its own thing. So he asked, how do we grow girls hockey locally so that girls teams don't have to go to Minnesota for everything?
I think, a lot of times that's what people want, but we're still, especially Midwest and out West, it's still a long ways out in my opinion. And I think you have to approach it as a 10 to 20 year strategy, not a 2-year strategy.
Right.
So that's really kind of what we've tried to do is we're I mean, we're in the same boat. We're the only girls association in the state. So, and similar to you guys, I mean, we're a big state. So our closest competition for our 16s and our 19s, because our 14s and younger play against the boys still. But for our 16s and 19s, their closest competition is 6 hours away. So they're driving all over, and we're working really hard with a lot of the southwestern states and even some of the northwestern states to start up a league to where we can have some more structure behind it, and it's not just these like one-off scrimmages. And then, you know, like a 6-hour drive, time-wise, maybe isn't that different, but cost-wise, compare that to going to a tournament in New York every single month. It's definitely a lot more affordable, but I think you just have to do the best you can for now with the older kids, give them the best experience possible, and really, really focus on figuring out what your pipeline is. I don't necessarily know, like, how close is Midland to Omaha?
It's about 45 minutes away. It's in a town, Fremont, just about 45 minutes northwest of here.
Yeah. And I don't know if Omaha has a women's program, but um, I think the big thing is, you know, invest in women who are interested in the game. That's something I think we did really well. I mean, we have a ton of women who like never grew up playing hockey, but we got them USA Hockey certified. We taught them how to skate. They're not the ones necessarily out there teaching the drills. They're just the ones having fun with the kids in line. And now
Right.
those girls are able to see that woman and go, wow, okay, I can be a hockey player. A 6-year-old doesn't know the difference. So I would say really figure out what's your pipeline program. Ours is small fries. Yours can be whatever. You're going to have someone with some business experience to market it. And then definitely making sure that you get some female coaches in there, I think is going to be critical. But you also have to keep in mind, like, I think one of the challenges, and it's such a chicken and the egg problem. If you're starting totally from scratch, and let's say you get, you know, 10 girls of different ages to come try hockey and whatever this program is going to be, you then have to have a place to put them. Because of those 10 girls, only 2 might want to continue to play with the boys. And
Right.
then now all of a sudden, if you've got 8 of those kids who don't have a girls program to go to, um, that's the big challenge. So you got to figure out, you know, how are you gonna get them in, create that feeder program, and then where are you gonna put them? So it's kind of a twofold thing, but I mean, I think you guys are probably a lot further behind than we are, just based on what you're saying. Because how many girls teams do you have total?
So we would have 5. If we have one on each level. Yeah, 5.
Okay. Yeah, so I mean, that's not bad. So that's the use. There is a pipeline there. So
And
I
what
don't know if anybody wants to specifically like reach out to me. I'm happy to talk to them about it because that's the thing. I mean, I sit on a committee for the NHL, like a female hockey advisory committee, and we put together this awesome toolkit that different markets can use. But and the idea of it was like use the tools that apply. But my philosophy, I was part of the creation of that, but like my philosophy is still very much like every market is so different, every
right.
city so different, and you got to kind of just get your hands dirty and really dig into everything. So if anybody wants to talk to me about that, I'd be happy to help them out.
Absolutely. And I think, you know, you mentioned older women kind of paving the way. We actually had a mom, and I think it was actually a group of moms in the last couple of years. They were tired of their sons always saying, you know, that they can't coach them if you don't know what you're doing yourself and stuff like that. So now we actually have a hockey moms program where there's probably 40 to 50 hockey moms that are learning to play hockey. And hopefully, like you said, it's, you know, more of a long-term game, but hopefully those hockey moms can help be a leader to pave the way for younger girls, for sure.
100%. Those will be your biggest advocates. They will be your best coaches. Like, use them as much as possible.
Yeah, it's been a fun process because, you know, it's people who have never put on hockey skates before and getting out there, and now their kids don't really have that same pushback anymore. They can't say that, oh, you can't tell me anything because you don't play. Well, not the fact anymore.
Yeah, right.
So it's pretty funny.
Exactly.
So girls and women's hockey has grown a lot, maybe more in certain areas than others, like yours. And success of Team USA has really inspired a lot of girls either to start or continue and really dream big of playing in World Juniors, college, Olympics, pros. What advice do you give to girls across the country who look up to people like you and want to play college and in the Olympics someday?
I mean, honestly, I think it's pretty simple. It's work hard, have fun. There's so many resources out there as far as like what you need to do to continue to excel and get better. But you have to, at the end of the day, put in the work. And that's something that took me a while to figure out. Like, I always just thought, oh, I'm bad at running. I'm bad at conditioning. No, I just had never put in the work. So I would say, work really hard and find those YouTube videos, try to, improve whatever it is that you're trying to improve, your stick handling, your shooting, your skating, constantly try to get better. But I think even more importantly, I would argue, you have to be having fun. When you're playing at a high level, whether that's high school, college, Olympics, pro, like, if you're not having fun, it's going to start to feel like a job. And when it starts to feel like a job, that's when it's really difficult to go out and play your best hockey. So I think, work hard, don't take yourself too seriously. Focus on what's in front of you. I mean, there's so many people who are in like middle school obsessing about which college they're going to go to. Enjoy where you're at right now. Just try to get a little better every day and make sure you're enjoying the process.
Right. Where do you see women's hockey, or where, I should say, not where do you see it, where do you want to see women's hockey go in the next, 5, 10, 20 years?
Yeah, I mean, I think at the youth level and at the collegiate level, we're in a really good spot. There are new collegiate teams popping up every single year. I think, some of the more non-traditional states like ours are seeing excellent growth in girls hockey, and we're going to continue to see that. I think the biggest thing right now and the thing that's the most fragile is professional women's hockey, and that's not really a secret for anyone. So there's, the PWHPA that's sort of petitioning the NWHL, and the CWHL folded. Like, it's a little bit of a mess, but I've got some reasons why I can't have too strong of an opinion about it. But I think my biggest thing is in the next 10 years, really even in the next 5 years, I just don't think that we can create something really special and sustainable without everybody working together. So I hope to see that, I don't want to say feud, but just, that divide kind of bridged a little bit over the next 5 years. And I think once that happens, you get the right people in leadership and, the right players involved. I think that women's professional hockey can be really special, and that's going to inspire girls. The Olympics and world championships, they're once a year. So I think
Right.
it is very important to have televised professional women's hockey that's a consistent singular league, that's really showcasing the best of the best, and that I think is going to scale that inspiration that you're talking about. So that's what I hope for.
Yeah, I think the 2014 and of course the 2018 Olympics, I really think that's how the hockey moms might have gotten started or got a little jump in their step to start that program, was the 2018 Olympics and seeing the women's hockey have such success. So yeah, I certainly am hoping that something comes along the way. Like you said, some politics you can't discuss, but I know your side of that. So we're hoping to have you come to Omaha next summer. That would be pretty
I would
awesome
love
to
that.
host a camp. What could we expect at a Lyndsey Fry hockey camp?
Yeah, it really depends. So because I go to such different markets, I've run camps where I have 15 kids, the youngest is 8 and the oldest is 18. And then I have some where, they have a lot of players at every age level. So I really try to tailor it to the group as best as possible. I talk a lot with coaches ahead of time to kind of prepare for that. I usually start out with more of an individual skills practice, so I can really see like, all right, how much team style drills can we do, where we're passing, where we're doing body contact. So I really kind of evaluate that day one, and then we go from there as far as the on ice. But I'm a big believer in, everybody can teach great on ice stuff. I think what I like to believe differentiates myself is, one, I understand where these girls are coming from. I've been in their shoes. I've been in a state that has the same challenges they do. So I think, being relatable and helping them be able to realize that, you can dream of this too. If I did it, you can do it. I am certified as a mental performance coach, so I do a lot of stuff on the mental game, which I don't think you get at many other camps. My fiance is a dietitian, so we've got a whole nutrition program that gets implemented, and kids can ask questions about that, do some off-ice stuff. I talk a lot, especially to the older girls. We'll do like a college hockey workshop, which is really important because a lot of, not just for the kids, but also for the parents, they don't have as much access to that kind of stuff as maybe kids in Boston or kids in Minnesota have. So I integrate that. So I just, I try to make my camps as customized as possible to the group I'm working with. But I also try to bring in more than just hockey, because when you get to some of the higher levels of the game, it's so much more than just, strapping on your skates and what you're doing on the ice. There's a lot of other things that go into being a high performer, and I just try to integrate all of them.
All right. Well, I'm excited. Hopefully we can get you out next summer to Omaha once all this stuff passes. It would have been great to have you out this year, but
I know. I'm trying to figure out how many of my camps I'm going to be able to run, but fingers crossed.
Right. Well, I certainly appreciate your time, and thank you for coming on. And like I said, we'll have to share some of the information to some of our folks here in the Midwest, because I think a lot of what you do could be beneficial to our people here.
Awesome. Yeah, for sure. And happy to help wherever I can.
Awesome. Thanks, Lindsay. Take care.
All right. Thanks, Nick. Appreciate it.